Saturday morning arrived with the kind of weather people secretly hope for on moving day. Cool air with bright skies. A light breeze moved through the lot, slipping between buildings and brushing past open truck doors without even getting in the way. The apartment parking lot was already filled long before most residents had finished breakfast. A few moving trucks and some pickup trucks were scattered through the lot. Open trunks revealed neatly stacked boxes while residents moved at an unhurried pace, carrying pieces of their lives one trip at a time. A roll of packing tape in one hand, coffee in the other. She almost didn't come. She stood for a moment, looked across the property. Rows of apartment buildings, fresh mulch surrounding the sidewalks, balconies catching the morning sun, people beginning entirely new chapters carrying everything they own inside cardboard boxes. Her best friend waved from across the parking lot. "You actually came," Sarah smiled. "I figured I could at least show up." The words sounded simple, but they carried more weight than either of them realized. Ever since that afternoon, something had been sitting quietly in the back of Sarah's head. It lingered there, never quite fading, always close enough to be felt. Did they love me? Or did they love what I did for them? She still didn't have an answer. She wasn't even sure she wanted one. Her friend walked over and wrapped her in a quick hug. "I'm really glad you're here." Sarah hugged her back. For a brief moment, the question grew quieter. Maybe she had been overthinking everything. One awkward conversation wouldn't erase years of friendship. Maybe they do love me. She wanted that to be true more than she realized. The moving truck doors rolled open. Someone shouted for a dolly. Another resident asked where the leasing office was as a little boy dropped a stuffed dinosaur in the middle of the sidewalk. Life was already beginning to spill into the morning. All right, where do we want to start? The bedroom next? Sarah smiled. "Lead the way." The next hour disappeared into ordinary things. Boxes became furniture, furniture became rooms. The apartment slowly stopped looking like a place someone had just moved into and started looking like a home. Every so often, Sarah stepped back, straightened the picture frame, moved the lamp a few inches, folded an empty box before anyone asked. The little things, the things nobody noticed until they aren't done. Her friend looked around and laughed. "I swear, I don't know what I'd do without you." Sarah smiled. "So you've told me." Her friend grinned. "No, seriously. You've always been that person." Sarah kept unpacking, listening. Without really thinking about it, her friend picked up her phone, snapped a picture of the living room, sent it to someone, then laughed. "You know what I told my sister?" Sarah looked up. "What?" "I told her not to worry. Sarah's coming." Another laugh. "She always figures everything out." Sarah smiled again, a smaller one this time. Her friend kept talking, completely unaware. "Honestly, if you hadn't come today," she looked around the apartment, "I probably would have been here all weekend trying to figure this place out." Sarah set another box on the counter. "You give me way too much credit." "No," her friend laughed. I give you the jobs nobody else can do. The sentence drifted through the room almost playfully. Then she smiled again. You're the one I count on whenever everything starts falling apart. Both of them laughed. Sarah felt something different, though. A small pull at first, almost unnoticeable. Her hands rested on the cardboard box she had been folding. The room hadn't changed. Her friend hadn't changed either. Only Sarah had. She had heard compliments like these for years and had always received them with warmth. Today, they landed somewhere else. She looked around the apartment. The bookshelves she'd assembled, the boxes she'd carried, every problem quietly solved before it had the chance to become someone else's. For too long, she had mistaken being depended on for being deeply known. The difference suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Before either of them spoke again, a knock echoed softly through the open apartment door. Her friend glanced toward the hallway. Come in. The leasing consultant stepped inside carrying a welcome packet. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure everything was going all right and see if there was anything you needed. Her friend smiled. We're good. She looked over at Sarah. She pretty much saved my morning. The consultant smiled politely. I noticed. Sarah looked up. You did? The consultant nodded. I was walking this building earlier. I saw the mix up with the movers and everyone starting to get frustrated. You stepped in before it became a problem. Sarah shrugged. I just slowed everybody down. Exactly, the consultant laughed softly. Most people wait until there's a fire. You put it out before it even started. Sarah wasn't sure how to respond. The consultant looked around the apartment one last time, then back at Sarah. Can I ask you something? Sarah nodded. Do you work in property management? No. I would have guessed you did. A brief silence settled between them. The consultant reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card. A friend of mine was a part of a management team over at the apartments on Grant Ave. She paused. They're rebuilding almost the entire office. Sarah looked at the card. I've watched managers with years of experience struggle to do what you did in 5 minutes. She handed Sarah the card. If you're ever looking for something different, I think you'd be a great fit. Sarah accepted it without saying a word. She looked down at the card, then back toward the apartment. Her friend was already unpacking another box, talking about where the couch should go. The conversation had moved on, but Sarah hadn't. She slipped the card into her back pocket. Finally, someone had seen something in her that had nothing to do with what she was willing to give away. Monday morning arrived dressed in expensive suits and freshly pressed contracts. Coffee poured into cups nobody planned on finishing. Ethan had chased this room for years, where signatures carried weight and lives forever changed. The attorneys exchanged a few final documents. Pens slid across polished wood. One last review. The seller smiled. Congratulations, Ethan nodded. Thank you. The words came automatically, like he'd practiced them years ago. The final page landed in front of him. He signed once, Then again, the attorney gathered the paperwork, shook Ethan's hand. As of 11:23 this morning, he smiled. You're officially the owner. The room relaxed. Someone chuckled. Another person reached across the table. Big day. It is. Ethan smiled. Or at least his face did. Inside, something never arrived. A few years ago, this would have been the biggest moment of his career. He would have called everyone, celebrated, taken pictures, posted the announcement before he even reached the parking lot. Today, though, none of that crossed his mind. The seller wished him luck. Someone joked about finally getting some sleep. Ethan stood by the conference room window, looking down. The apartment community stretched across the property. The apartment community stretched across the property below. Families walked toward their buildings. A maintenance technician loading supplies into a cart. A little girl chasing bubbles across the grass while her mother struggled with groceries. Normal life, quiet life. He couldn't explain. He watched longer than he meant to. His phone vibrated. A text. Congratulations, brother. Huge win. Another arrived. Proud of you. Let's celebrate tonight. Ethan looked at the screen, then locked it again. No reply. His eyes drifted back toward the property. Children, parents, and neighbors. People beginning another ordinary Monday. For years, Ethan had looked at apartment communities and seen numbers, cash flow, cap rates, returns. Standing there, an image interrupted that habit. A little boy standing by a window, waiting. The picture lingered this time, long enough to feel like a memory he didn't remember living. Ethan closed his eyes, took a slow breath. When he opened them again, the building looked exactly the same. But something beneath them had deviated, as a current moving under still water. Without saying a word, he slipped the keys into his pocket and headed toward the property he had just purchased. He had no idea something unseen had already begun to claim him. The evening settled quietly over the apartment community. The parking lot looked different after dark, porch lights replacing sunlight as television flickered behind curtains and children slowly disappeared indoors one by one. Michael pulled into his usual parking spot, killed the engine, and sat there, the memory from work still clinging to him. Grabbing his bag, he started toward Building 4, the familiar sidewalk carrying him home almost without thought, past the same cracks, the same trees, and the worn handrail along the stairs, its rough edges reminding him of the times it scraped his skin. He'd walked this path hundreds of times. This time, he actually saw it. A little girl sat outside drawing with sidewalk chalk while an older man watered flowers on his balcony, and someone laughed from an open window as a couple argued softly somewhere nearby before the doors quietly closed. Life, simple, ordinary. Michael unlocked his apartment and stepped inside, where silence greeted him. He tossed his keys in the bowl near the door and dropped his bag beside the couch. His eyes landed on the lease renewal package still sitting on its kitchen counter, exactly where he left it. He picked it up and read the first page. Another 12 months of the same apartment, routine and life. Normally, he would have signed it without thinking. Instead, he walked toward the living room window and looked out across the property. Lights glowed from dozens of apartments. Behind every window, someone was living a story he'd never know. Some were raising glasses, laughter spilled in the night. Others sat in quiet rooms holding on to memories that refused to fade. Michael rested one hand against the glass. For years, this place had simply been where he lived. Tonight, it felt like something else. He couldn't quite put his hand on it. His phone vibrated, an email notification. Property ownership update. Michael glanced at the subject line. His eyes moved slowly across the pages. The apartment community had been sold. New ownership would officially assume operation in the coming weeks. No immediate changes. Business as usual. Michael locked his phone, set it face down on the counter. The name Ethan Cross meant nothing to him. The sale itself had been finalized only hours earlier, though he had no way of knowing. Around him, the building had already slipped quietly into a new chapter. And still, he simply stood there, looking through the window, completely unaware that the place he called home for years had already begun changing before he'd even noticed. Morning arrived quietly. Grant Avenue didn't notice. It had seen thousands of mornings before this one. Children raced toward school buses. Night shift workers finally came home. Coffee brewed behind dozens of kitchen windows. Dogs pulled owners across damp sidewalks as maintenance carts rolled slowly between buildings. Life unfolding the way it always had. In apartment 104, a young couple argued over money before either of them left for work. Across the courtyard, an elderly widow watered flowers planted by her husband, who had been gone nearly 8 years. Over in Building 4, Michael locked his apartment and headed toward another day at the office. He nodded politely to a neighbor whose name he had never learned. The neighbor smiled. Michael smiled back. Both kept walking. Neither realized how many mornings they'd shared without ever truly knowing one another. Miles away, Sarah's car rolled quietly through morning traffic. The business card rested inside the center console. She hadn't thrown it away, hadn't called either. It simply waited. Meanwhile, Ethan stepped through the leasing office for the very first time as its new owner. Employees smiled, introductions were exchanged, hands were shaken. He learned names and forgot half of them immediately. Someone pointed toward maintenance. Another mentioned occupancy. A third talked about budgets. The words blended together. Yet something kept drawing Ethan's attention somewhere else. Residents, not statistics. People carrying groceries. Children waiting for parents. Neighbors stopping to talk on the sidewalk. Tiny moments. Easy to overlook, harder to ignore. Over the years, Michael had called this place home. Sarah had only heard its name. Ethan just invested millions to own it. 3 people, 3 completely different paths, quietly moving toward the same destination. Grant Avenue had no idea who they were. It didn't need to. Long before any of them arrived, it had already been shaping lives. tomorrow it will begin shaping theirs.